Morning. Men, while I'm doing this next little part, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and be putting your face mask on. I'm going to ask you all to do something for me here in just a second. Don't worry, it's painless. We're not going to wash anybody's feet or anything. Um, while I'm doing that, for the people watching on Facebook, I know we got some odd angles, filming at an odd angle today, but it's because I've got a lot of slides and I haven't taught anybody else how to use the program yet, so that's why we're at a little bit of a different angle today. Keith, can you go ahead and go to that next slide? Men, if you are physically able, please stand up and come forward and just kind of spread out behind me or to the side of me or whatever you want to do it. Here. Give them a few minutes to get up here. So do y'all know what this is? What this represents in our society? It represents a endangered species of men or Christian men that'll go to church and to willing to put their name in front of or behind God to serve God. And this is not a knock on women at all. I'm not speaking about women today. Y'all do a lot. Y'all are very important. It's just men have a different role. Men and women have different roles no matter what society says. And we have a dangerously low men population in churches. There is a difference in how, studies have shown there's a difference in how women relate to faith and how men relate to faith. And I think it has a lot to do with that women give birth, so they have a miracle inside of them, and so it's easier for them to see faith or connect to faith. Plus, women are typically more emotional and able to connect to faith easier than men. Men a lot of times have to see and touch stuff to really grasp it, and it's hard sometimes for all of us, not just men, but for men especially, to have faith and to keep faith. And we all, or at least a lot of us, struggle with I read a lot of studies before I did this, and they all showed that men typically, especially single men, will not go to church because they don't want to open up and they don't want to be vulnerable and stuff like that. So I really appreciate all these guys up here. I've learned things from each and every one of you. Some of you I've known for 40 years, and some of you I've known my whole life, and some of you I've known for just a few years. But we talk about, I've learned stuff like, hard work and work ethic, and how to persevere through hard times, and how to have wisdom in different situations, and just different things. How to laugh, when you're sad, and how to comfort people when they're sad. For my dad, I've learned, no man's taught me any more positive things than my dad, and that's the way it should be. But I'm going to show an example later on of a not so positive things that a father can teach a child too. But it's very important that we're here, and I just want to thank you guys for being here every Sunday. I struggle with it. I have the man thing where I'm tired on the weekends a lot of times, and I don't want to come. And I told Mama that's a fear of mine. When if something ever happened to her, that I wouldn't have the willpower to keep coming, and it's something I struggle with that I think about. Which hopefully nothing ever happens to Mama. But again, I want to reiterate, this has nothing to do with downing women or anything like that. I grew up with two very strong women in my household, so I know very well the role that women play and stuff. This is just a different role. But before I let these guys go, let's pray for them real quick. Dear Heavenly Father, just want to thank you for these men up here, and just thank you for the blessing they've been on my life and on the the people just that they touch every day, and just help us to grow this number of men and to keep everybody keep coming back, and just help us to keep growing in your word and to be good people and to be good stewards of your word. God, like I said earlier, we have a declining number of men that are putting you first and willing to go to church and stuff, and it's been declining for decades, but we were almost at a critical level, and just help us multiply that number, help us to put men back into society the way they were meant to be, and just bless us all in Christ's name. Amen. You guys can have a seat.
I want to recognize a couple of great guys at home, Don Montgomery and Leon Frederick. We love you, and you're great men of faith, and Bobby Valentine. We appreciate all of y'all too.
Yeah, I will point out that Don was the first one up here when I said something. There is a war on men in this country, and you may look at that and think that I left the woe off the first of that, because what we hear every day is there's a war on women. That's been because it's been pushed by the left, and basically you can boil that down to mean that we don't want women to be able to kill their children, and that's what that basically boils down to in their eyes. But I just put these few little slides on here. The left in our country seeks to replace men or manhood by the feminization of men. If you notice, there are no good portrayals of men in Hollywood or on most movies, or I can't think of any on TV. This is all part of the goal to eliminate the nuclear family and ultimately God. This is a long plan that they've been working on. They've been working on this for at least 100 years. And they think they're at the point where they can win the war now. So we're seeing the mask come off of people and see them push more aggressively towards this type of thing. On TV, we see stuff like this guy that represent men, Al Bundy. And some of it's for comedic effect, but when you don't have a good role model to balance that out, it paints an impression of men that we're all bumbling idiots and don't know anything. Or Homer Simpson is the longest running dad in TV history, which a lot of that has to do with he's a cartoon, but that's how they portray men. That either they portray men as they're bumbling and they're idiots, or they want men to be more like women. And we're seeing that where they're trying to cross the roles of men and women all the time. We don't see guys like this anymore. Andy Griffith, who had lots of good talks with Opie. A lot of men learned how to talk to their kids, I think, from watching shows like this. And I can remember, one show where Andy thought Opie was stealing or something like that, but he was actually getting money to go buy a coat for a friend that was cold, and that just was one that sticks out to me, but I know there were many of them. This guy, I don't know if a lot of y'all recognize, because it was a show in the 90s, Uncle Phil. I put him on here because not only was he a great dad to his own kids and show them how to be men and stuff, he was also a good role model to his nephew, who was the Fresh Prince or whatever. There's a great scene in the show that if you look it up, I think you can just type in on YouTube, Uncle Phil and Will, and about when Will is talking about his biological dad not needing him. And it's it's ranked one of the most powerful moments in TV history, and especially for a comedy show. It was just, if you can get through it without crying, I saw it the other day again, and I've seen it 100 times, and I cry every time because it's just so powerful. This guy right here, the actor, had some trouble, but the Huxtables was a good role model for people for a long time on TV of how they treated each other and how they gave advice and how he taught Theo to be a man and stuff like that. This one goes way back. I used to watch this with Mama some when Nick at Night first came out. My three sons, I don't remember the father's name, but I remember it being a good example of a father teaching his sons how to grow up to be men. And that's something we lack nowadays, where people don't want to. People teach you to. Their boys are taught to give in more than they are to take a stand on what they believe, even if they're taught to what to believe. We need men to be great again. That's kind of stealing a little bit from Donald Trump saying, but it's a true statement. We do need men. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. I'll just put that on there. But we do need men to be great again, to take stands when it's not popular at their own risk. This picture right here, of course, everybody knows Jackie Robinson and what Jackie Robinson went through. But not a lot of people know about the white guy that's sitting next to him. And that guy's name is Branch Rickey. And let me give you a little bit of background on him before I tell you why he signed Jackie Robinson. Branch Rickey was known as a devout Christian who would a lot of times preach to people that would come to his office to talk about baseball. He would end up preaching to them about Jesus to them. He was also, when he was a manager, would not manage his team on Sundays. He would have the assistant manager, coach, manage, and he would take the day off to go to church because he didn't feel like you should work on Sundays, just showing the level of his faith. And 30 to 40 years before this, he was coaching a college team. And his best player was a catcher, and the guy just happened to be black. And they were invited to go play at Notre Dame. And they got to the hotel, and they wouldn't let the black guy check in. And Mr. Rickey said, "You don't understand. We're here as guests of Notre Dame." And they said, "We don't care. He can't stay here. He can't sign for a room. He can't stay here." And he said, "Well, can he stay in my room, and I will be responsible for him?" So they worked it out so he could stay in his room. He told the player, "Go on up to my room. I'm going to get the rest of the team settled, and I will be up there later." And he said he took him a little bit of time to get up to the room. When he got there, the guy was sitting on the bed and crying and rubbing his hands like this. And he said, "It's my skin, Mr. Rickey. If I could just get my skin off, I could be like everybody else." And later on, when he was asked of why he was attempting to sign Jackie Robinson, because the other general managers and stuff were telling him, "You're going to get hate mail, you're going to get death threats, you're going to be run out of baseball. Why would you do this?" He told that story, and he said, "All these years I've heard that boy crying in my head, and I couldn't do anything about it." And he said, "Now I have the opportunity to come to do something about it." The reason he had an opportunity to do something about it was because of World War II, believe it or not, because we had black soldiers going over and fighting with our white soldiers, and they were making the point of, if we can take a bullet, we can catch a ball, And so it gave him the opportunity World War II gave him the opportunity to try this, which comes to Jackie Robinson's part. He told Jackie Robinson, and Rickey was also known as a guy that never cussed, never used foul language, but he called Jackie Robinson into the office, and he told him what he was wanting to do, and he called him every name in the book and ran him through every situation that he would run into, to see if he could get him mad to handle it. And the famous line is, Jackie Robinson said, "You want somebody that's not man enough to stand up for himself and fight back?" And he said, "No, I want somebody man enough not to fight back, because of he said, because if you fight back, it won't matter who threw the first punch. They're only going to see you as as what they want you to see you as a bad person." So it was very important that Jackie Robinson be able to take on all that stuff and not respond And we all know how hard that would be because they weren't just calling him names; they were calling his wife names and his kids names and stuff. And he just had to take it. But and that would be a hard thing, I would imagine, to do. And it's just it's just sad that we had to go through that as a country. But these men stood up. This is a famous picture of him when he did make it to the Brooklyn Dodgers, or still at home. And there's a movie that just came out not long ago called 42. And me and Mama watched it a few days ago. And there's just a great scene in the movie that just kind of nails home everything that they were going through. And it's the Dodgers were traveling to Cincinnati to play the Reds. And it shows a father and son sitting in the seats, and the son's all excited to see Pee Wee Reese, who's the Hall of Fame shortstop or he goes on to be in the Hall of Fame, but it was the star shortstop for the Dodgers. And he said, Dad, Pee Wee Reese is the greatest, isn't he, Dad? He's the greatest, isn't he, Dad? And Dad was like, yes, son, he's the greatest. He's our favorite player and stuff. And they're talking about Pee Wee Reese, and, just having a good father and son moment. And about the time the Dodgers take the field and Jackie Robinson runs out, and the dad jumps up and he said, "Go home, nigger, we don't want you here." And the son looks up at his dad, and he looks out to the field, and he looks back at his dad, and then the son stands up and says, "Go home, nigger, we don't want you here." And I hate that word, but I wanted to I didn't want to abbreviate it because I wanted you to understand the hate that they were saying. But the kid didn't know what he was saying. He was just following what his dad says. So this is all going on. Well, Pee Wee Reese, they're taking infield. The Dodgers are taking infield, which means, the first baseman, which is Jackie Robinson, was throwing the ball, and they throw it back just to get their loose and stuff. And Pee Wee Reese stops and walks over to Jackie Robinson. And Jackie Robinson said, "What you doing, man?" And Pee Wee Reese puts his arm around Jackie Robinson and says, "I'm from this area, and I want these people to know what kind of man I am." And the crowd shuts up after that for the most part because, and I don't know if Pee Wee Reese actually said those words, but I do know that he did put his arm around Jackie Robinson at that game. And that's 3 examples of great men right there. That's 2 that did really big things that changed history. Because not only Jackie Robinson probably did more for the civil rights movement than even Martin Luther King did as far as getting things accepted. Because sports has a funny way of doing that, where you can, they see that he could play with white guys, and nothing bad was going to happen. Now, if we'd have put somebody like Dennis Rodman or somebody out there for the first time, it would have been a different result. But so they were smart on who they could pick, because Jackie Robinson was not the best player in the Negro Leagues. He was far from the best player. But the other ones, they had character issues that they, wasn't sure how they would react to stuff. And Robinson had a military background that he had some discipline and stuff. But so it shows those 2 guys, Branch Rickey for willing to take the risk of doing this and alienating himself to all of baseball. Jackie Robinson willing to take on all this stuff without fighting back. Those are 2 big things. Those are 2 history-changing things. But Pee Wee Reese coming up and putting his arm around him at that ball game is a very little thing that just shows that you don't have to change history to be a great man. You can be a great man in your own life. My brother is a great man to his kids. He raises, I don't even forget how many kids now, so many. But, and we have great men in here, that were up here a while ago. We have great men that's been in this church before. Tom Coram comes to mind as one that's moved on to a different church. Billy Counts, who comes back. We just have all these great men to draw on, but if you look around, they're all of an older generation. I'm not saying y'all are old, but you know, there are not many my age here, which I'm old too. So there's definitely not many younger around. So we need to find a way to start encouraging these men, and hopefully, you know, we can get all this, get men turned back around, and get men willing to take a stand and stuff, and women too, because it appears that, you know, this election may be stolen, and there's going to be some tough times coming if it is, because I'm telling you right now, they're going to come after churches. It's in his first 100 days that he's going to come after churches in different ways, and the more they do, the bolder they'll get. So it may come a time when you have to decide between saying you're a Christian or losing your job, and that may be the small end of it. The Ray Boltz, is it Ray Boltz, the video that you play all the time, where he has to lose his life because he won't deny Christ. And sadly, that's a very real possibility in the next 20 years in this country. Another thing that comes to mind is, you know, there's a whole saying, if they started convicting Christians, would they find enough evidence on me to convict me? And I hope that they would, you know, but there's been times where somebody would go, oh, I didn't know you were a Christian at work or something, and I'm like, you know, well, I know they didn't mean that in a bad way, but that hurt me. It made me feel about that big, you know, and I was like, well, I need to step some things up then. But I do believe God will take care of us too. It'll all be in His will. It'll all work out in the end to His glory. But, you know, there may be some tribulations coming. But in my life anyway, I tend to find God puts things in my life to help me get through. And I told the guy that I'm working with now that just happened to be a black guy, you know, I told him the other day, you know, you didn't take this job because you needed a job. You took it because God needed you to be here for me. And he said, why do you say that? And I said, well, I said, because you're the type of person that you're going to make people laugh and have fun whether they want to or not. And I said, I needed that because of what I was going through at the time. And he said, well, that's funny you say that, because he said, I really hadn't told you this, but he said, I turned down a better paying job to come here. And he said, I had a feeling that Hackney was a better fit for me. And so we've become really close friends. And it was funny because we were talking, because I bounce a lot of sermon ideas off of him because he's a preacher also. And we were talking about this we were doing a story in Town Creek. And there was an older black woman listening to us, and he said, he said, yeah, men rule the world or something. And he said what he said was taken out of context from what she heard. But she just kind of gave us a look and like, yeah, right, you know, but it was kind of just funny, but I guess you had to be there. But anyway, we want to just, like I say, keep praying for the men in society and also the women too. But like I said, it seems like men are more and more under attack. If you have a need this morning, come forward as we stand and sing, and we'll pray for you or whatever we need to do for you. And just want to thank you for letting me speak. I'm probably not the one that should do this because I'll probably start crying, but um, Mama can't come forward because it's hard for her to get up and move stuff, but she wanted me to ask that for her to get a better attitude about things and, not let the hurting and stuff make her have a bad attitude. And just there's people a lot worse off that, that have good attitudes about things. And is that right? And we realize that, that it's not, that she's not being negative towards us necessarily. It's just the pain that makes her say things sometimes, and she's harder on herself than we are towards her. I mean, because we understand, but she don't think we do, but we do. And she's been through a lot the last 2 years, and but we've been blessed too because had she had that surgery first, and that appendix thing would have came up, or not appendix, but hernia, she very well probably would have died. And I can't imagine my life without her. That's something that has always been a fear of mine, of losing both parents, but especially your mama. So, but anyway, we just want to pray for her, that about her attitude, and just that she can be happy, find some happiness. And seems like every time she gets a little bit of joy, something knocks her back, whether it's trying to dance and falling, or whatever. And we just want her to be the joyful person she's always been. So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, just want to thank you for my mom. She don't always realize it, but she's the rock to our family. She's the reason that I'm here as a Christian, because she made me go when I didn't want to go. She didn't give up on me when she couldn't force me to go anymore, and I didn't go. And we just wish that she could, we ask that you restore her health so she can have joy and be able to do things, and to help people like she likes to do, and to just to do all the things that she did before all this hip surgery stuff came up. God, just help her know that everybody in here loves her, and a lot more people out in the world love her. I'm a little biased, but I don't know of too many people better on this earth than my mom. But just help her with her attitude and stuff, and just help me and Daddy to be more helpful, and to try to be more empathetic of what she's going through, and understand more, and just for our attitudes too. God, I thank you for parents that would be willing to let a 40-something-year-old kid come back and live with them. And just thank you for all that they've done for me to help me get through the time that I went through. And God, I know that you can take this pain away from her. And we just ask that you do that, and just ask that you help, like I said, help her to have a better attitude. In Christ's name.
I appreciate the sentiment that you expressed, Paula, that Gabe's right. You're a lot harder on yourself, and I find that to be true with Rita a lot of times. She was just apologizing for something this morning. If we'd been gearing up to go for surgery tomorrow, but when you have a lot of constant acute pain